For decades, it felt like the world had a clear rulebook for global trade. But according to Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, that rulebook has just been completely torn up. He argues we're in the middle of a really dramatic and, more importantly, permanent shift, and it was all kicked off by the United States. So let's dive in and break down what this new world really looks like. Mafioso economic policy. I mean, that's a pretty wild line, right? But that's how the economists describe this new U.S. approach. And it really cuts right to the heart of what's happening. We're not just talking about little tweaks around the edges here. This is a fundamental overhaul of how the world's biggest economy deals with everybody else. And believe me, the stakes could not be higher. All right, so when this new kind of aggressive policy hits the global stage, what's the first thing you feel? Well, that first shockwave. It comes from tariffs. Take a country like Canada, for instance. It's so deeply connected to the U.S. economy, the impact was, well, immediate. As Carney points out, the Canadian economy actually shrank in the quarter right after those tariffs were put in place. It's just a really stark, real-world example of the economic damage this new approach can cause, right out of the gate. Okay, but here's the thing Carney really hammers home. The tariffs themselves, they're only part of the picture. The real damage, the thing that's way more insidious, is the uncertainty it creates. Think about it. If you're a business anywhere in the world and you have no idea what the rules of trade are going to be tomorrow, what do? You stop investing. You hit pause. And that collective hesitation, that's what really cripples global growth, way more than just the tariffs themselves. But to really get why this is all happening, we've got to dig a little deeper than just the tariffs. We need to look at the economic philosophy that's driving all this. And it's a worldview that basically flips decades of economic thinking right on its head. So, according to Carney, the administration sees global trade pretty much like a business balance sheet. The thinking is super simple. A trade surplus is like positive cash flow. You're winning, you're making a profit. A deficit means you're losing, or even worse, that you're getting ripped off. And right there, you have this huge fundamental clash. On one side, you got this very straightforward surplus equals success view. And on the other, you have these core economic principles like comparative advantage and the special role of a reserve currency, which frankly tell a much, much more complicated story. So let's just quickly unpack that traditional view, right? The first piece is comparative advantage. The whole idea is actually pretty simple. If every country just focuses on what it does best and then trades for everything else, the entire world gets richer. The whole pie gets bigger for everyone. Okay, and the second piece of this traditional puzzle is all about the US dollar. Because it's the world's reserve currency, everyone needs dollars to do business. So to get those dollars out there, the US has to run a deficit. It has to pump those dollars into the world. So from that point of view, a deficit isn't a sign of failure at all. It's just part of the job of being the world's financial backbone. Okay, so if the US is basically playing a whole new ballgame with a different rulebook, what's the rest of the world supposed to do? Are they just rolling over and accepting it, or are they finding ways to fight back? Well, the first thought for a lot of people is that the US just holds all the power. I mean, with that huge economy, it really feels like they hold all the cards in any negotiation, right? But this is where Carney's insight is so important. He says, sure, the US might dominate that game, but it's not the only game in town. The rest of the world is waking up to the fact that they don't have to play on a field that's tilted against them. They can just start playing different games. So what does that actually look like? What does playing a different game mean in the real world? Well, it's a pretty clear three-step strategy. First, you get your own house in order, strengthen your own economy. Second, you go out and you actively build new alliances and trade deals with other countries. And third, and this is the big one, you build up what Carney calls an outside option, basically a plan B. An economic future that isn't so dangerously dependent on the United States. But in the short term, while they build that future, countries are being super pragmatic. Carney has this great analogy for it. He calls it the Costco membership model. Countries are basically asking themselves, okay, what's the price of admission to the giant US market? Is it worth paying the tariff fee? Or maybe we make a strategic investment to get in. It's just a very transactional way of thinking, which honestly fits this new transactional world perfectly. But all of this, the new games, the Costco memberships, it's not just a temporary fix. And this brings us to the most, frankly, startling part of Carney's whole argument. He doesn't see this as some passing political storm. He sees it as a permanent break with the past. Yeah, a rupture. That's the word he uses, and it's a powerful one. It's not a crack, it's a complete break, something that can't just be patched back together. The old system of global rules-based trade isn't just on pause. According to Carney, it's gone. Shattered. And I mean, this is a pretty stunning prediction he makes. He's basically saying that the political mood in the US has shifted so deeply that the country will probably stay a high tariff nation for a long, long time, no matter who's in charge. That old consensus for free trade, it's broken. So, if that old one-size-fits-all system is dead, what comes next? Carney has a term for it: variable geometry. So, forget about a single global system. The future is much more like a patchwork quilt of different deals, different blocks, different alliances. So this new world, it's going to be shaped by what Carney calls coalitions of the willing, countries that choose to work more closely together based on shared values and interests. You can almost picture it like concentric circles, right? You'll have your tightest, most trusted partnerships right there in the center, and then maybe some looser agreements and arrangements as you move further out. But, and this is a big but, there's a huge trade-off in this new world. On the one hand, a fragmented system like this might be more resilient. You know, if your supply chains aren't all in one basket, you're less vulnerable to a shock from any one country. But on the other hand, it's almost guaranteed to be less efficient than the hyper-globalized system we're leaving behind. And what does that mean for us? Well, it could mean slower growth and higher prices for pretty much everyone. So, here we are. We're really standing at a major turning point in history. The map of global trade that we've known for our entire lives has basically been torn up. As Carney says, the rupture is real and it's likely permanent. And all of that leaves us with the single most important question there is. If the old system is really over, who's going to build the new one?